Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Discovery and watched the stars shift as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The year was 2157, and humanity had finally built ships that could reach the far edges of space. Jake had been chosen to lead this mission because he was calm under pressure and good at making friends with strangers. What he did not expect was to meet strangers who were not human at all. The Discovery was a good ship with a crew of 40 humans who had trained for years to explore new worlds. Dr. Lisa Parker was the ship's expert on alien life, even though she had never seen any aliens before. Engineer Pete Rodriguez could fix anything that broke and always had a smile on his face. Kate Sullivan knew more about building things than anyone else on the ship. They were all excited to be the first humans to travel this far from Earth. The ship's computers started beeping with warnings. Something very large was approaching from the direction of a nearby star. Jake told his crew to stay calm and prepare for whatever they might find. The thing that appeared on their screens was bigger than any ship humans had ever built. It looked like a city floating in space with towers and bridges connecting different sections. A voice came through their radio speaking perfect English, which surprised everyone. The voice said it belonged to Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective, and that humans were invited to meet at a neutral station called Kepler 442b. Jake accepted the invitation because this was exactly why they had come to space. Lisa was so excited she could barely contain herself. Pete started checking all their systems to make sure everything worked perfectly. The journey to Kepler 442b took 2 days, during which the crew prepared for first contact with an alien species. Lisa studied everything they knew about the Zephyrian message while Kate made sure their translation computers were working properly. Jake practiced diplomatic speeches in his cabin, but decided that being himself would work better than fancy words. Kepler 442b turned out to be a massive research station built around a small moon. The station had docking bays that could fit ships of many different sizes and shapes. When the Discovery connected to one of these bays, Jake felt his heart beating faster than usual. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. The airlock opened and Jake stepped through, followed by Lisa and Pete. The corridor beyond was filled with beings that looked nothing like humans. Some were tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. Others were short and covered in fur, with large eyes that seemed to see everything. A few looked like they were made of living metal that shifted and flowed as they moved. Ambassador Veltar was waiting for them in a large room with windows that showed the stars outside. Veltar looked like a cross between a human and a bird, with feathers that changed color when different emotions crossed their face. The ambassador's voice was musical and pleasant when they welcomed the humans to the station. Veltar explained that the Zephyrian Collective was an alliance of 12 different species that had been exploring space for thousands of years. They had been watching humanity for some time and were curious about this new species that had finally developed space travel. The ambassador's tone suggested they thought humans were interesting, but not particularly impressive. Lisa could not help herself and started asking questions about Zephyrian biology and culture. Her enthusiasm made several of the aliens step back in surprise because they were used to more formal interactions. Pete began examining the technology around them with obvious fascination and started explaining how human fusion drives worked even though nobody had asked. Jake noticed that the aliens seemed confused by his crew's behavior. They kept looking at each other and making notes on devices that floated in the air around them. When Jake asked what they found so interesting, Veltar explained that most species they encountered were either very logical or very emotional, but humans seemed to be both at the same time. The meeting was going well until warning alarms started sounding throughout the station. A massive solar flare from the nearby star was heading toward them and would hit in less than an hour. The station's shields were not designed to handle something that powerful, and everyone would need to work together to strengthen them or risk being destroyed. Most of the aliens immediately began calculating the exact probability of survival and discussing whether they should evacuate. Some species started panicking while others became completely calm and logical. The humans reacted differently than anyone expected. Jake immediately started asking what needed to be done, while Lisa began studying the shield technology, and Pete rolled up his sleeves and asked where the repair tools were kept. Kate Sullivan proved to be exactly what the situation needed. She looked at the shield generators and told everyone that the problem was simple, but the solution would require creativity rather than advanced technology. While the aliens debated mathematical formulas, Kate gathered spare parts from around the station, including some human duct tape that Pete always carried with him. What Kate built should not have worked according to everything the Zephyrians knew about physics and engineering. She connected human technology to alien systems using principles that made no sense to beings who had studied science for thousands of years. But when the solar flare hit the station, the shields held perfectly, and everyone survived. Ambassador Veltar watched the humans celebrate their success by laughing and hugging each other, while also immediately starting to help repair other damaged systems around the station. The ambassador had never seen a species that could switch so quickly between intense focus and joyful celebration, while never stopping their work to help others. During the long hours of repairs that followed, Jake found himself working alongside aliens who had initially seemed distant and formal. Pete's jokes and Kate's practical solutions broke down barriers that had existed for centuries between different species. Lisa's genuine curiosity about alien biology made several scientists eager to share their knowledge with her. As the Discovery prepared to leave the station, Ambassador Veltar approached Jake with an unusual request. The collective was planning an archaeological expedition to study an abandoned world, and they wanted humans to join them. Jake accepted immediately because he could see that this was just the beginning of something much larger than a simple first contact meeting. The humans returned to their ship, knowing that everything had changed. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had already proven that humanity had something unique to offer to the galactic community. Jake looked out at the stars and realized that their real adventure was just beginning. 3 months after first contact, the USS Discovery arrived at Xerion Prime with a mixed crew of humans and aliens working together on their first joint mission. The planet below them had once been home to an advanced civilization that had simply vanished without explanation thousands of years ago. Ambassador Veltar believed that studying this mystery could help all species understand the dangers that existed in deep space. Danny Foster and Dr. Amy Chen were the human representatives chosen for the ground team because Danny had military experience and Amy was an expert at studying ancient cultures. They would work alongside Crixnall, who was a 6-legged creature with incredible eyesight, and Zermoth, whose people could sense electromagnetic fields with their natural abilities. The shuttle ride to the planet's surface should have been routine, but Xerion Prime had surprises waiting for them. As they descended through the atmosphere, strange magnetic fields began interfering with their navigation systems. The alien technology that normally worked perfectly in any environment started giving incorrect readings and making unusual noises. Danny noticed the problems first because his military training had taught him to watch for signs of trouble. He told the pilot to find a safe place to land immediately, but the magnetic interference was getting stronger every minute. The shuttle's engines began failing, and emergency systems that should have activated automatically remained silent and useless. Amy was studying her instruments when the shuttle crashed into a rocky hillside with enough force to throw everyone against the walls. When the dust settled, they discovered that their communication equipment was completely dead, and their emergency beacon was not transmitting. The shuttle's hull was cracked, and their supplies were scattered across the crash site. Crixnall had suffered a broken leg in the crash and was in obvious pain despite trying to hide it from the others. Zurmoth's electromagnetic senses were overwhelmed by the planet's strange fields, and they could barely function normally. The other alien team members were struggling to understand why their advanced technology had failed so completely. Danny and Amy immediately began assessing their situation without waiting for orders or lengthy discussions. Danny checked everyone for injuries while Amy gathered the scattered supplies and began taking inventory of what they had to work with. Their calm efficiency impressed the aliens who were still trying to understand what had gone wrong with their equipment. The planet's electromagnetic fields were unlike anything in Zephyrian records and seemed to affect alien technology much more severely than human equipment. Amy's simple compass and Danny's mechanical watch were still working perfectly, while devices that could normally function in the vacuum of space were completely useless. Water was their first priority, and Amy used basic chemistry knowledge to test local streams for safety. She built a simple filtration system using cloth from their emergency supplies and activated charcoal that Danny found in the shuttle's emergency kit. The aliens watched in fascination as she created clean drinking water using methods their people had forgotten thousands of years ago. Food became the next challenge when they realized their emergency rations had been damaged in the crash. Danny's survival training proved invaluable as he identified edible plants and showed the team how to catch small animals using simple traps. The aliens had never needed such primitive skills because their technology normally provided everything they required. Building shelter required everyone to work together, but the humans took the lead in organizing the effort. Danny used his engineering knowledge to design a simple structure, while Amy studied the local weather patterns to choose the best location. They taught the aliens how to gather materials and work with their hands instead of relying on automated construction tools. 3 days passed, and the alien team members began showing signs of despair that surprised Danny and Amy. Species that had conquered space travel and built massive cities were becoming depressed because they could not contact their ships or use their familiar technology. Some aliens suggested they should simply wait for rescue, while others worried they might never be found. Amy found their attitude puzzling because she and Danny were actually enjoying the challenge of surviving with limited resources. They had grown up hearing stories about human ancestors who had survived in harsh environments using nothing but their intelligence and determination. This situation felt like an exciting test of their abilities rather than a hopeless disaster. Their real test came when Crixnall's injury became infected, despite their medical supplies. The aliens' condition was deteriorating rapidly, and their people's natural healing abilities were not working properly in the planet's strange electromagnetic environment. Without proper medical treatment, Crixnall would die within days. Amy had some medical training, but nothing that prepared her for treating an alien with 6 legs and completely different biology. She studied everything they knew about Crixnall's people and began experimenting with treatments using the limited supplies available. Danny helped by gathering medicinal plants that Amy thought might have healing properties. The surgery that followed tested everyone's resolve as Amy worked for 14 hours straight, using improvised tools to clean the infection from Crixnall's leg. Danny assisted while the other aliens watched in amazement as the humans refused to give up even when the situation seemed hopeless. Amy's hands never shook, and her voice remained calm throughout the entire procedure. When Crixnall's condition stabilized, the real challenge began because they needed to travel across rough terrain to reach a location where their rescue signal might penetrate the electromagnetic interference. Crixnall could not walk on the injured leg, and the other aliens were not physically capable of carrying their teammate over long distances. Danny and Amy solved the problem by building a simple stretcher and taking turns carrying Crixnall between them. The journey that followed covered more than 50 kilometers of rocky hills and dense forests that tested everyone's endurance. The humans never complained or suggested leaving anyone behind even when they were exhausted and struggling. The aliens began to understand something important about humanity during those difficult days of travel. Danny and Amy possessed a type of persistence that their people had never encountered before. When faced with seemingly impossible challenges, the humans simply kept working toward solutions without wasting time on despair or complex philosophical discussions. More importantly, the humans seemed to become stronger and more determined when protecting someone who could not protect themselves. The idea of abandoning Crixnall never occurred to them, even though doing so would have made their own survival much easier. Their loyalty to teammates went beyond logical calculation into something the aliens found both puzzling and admirable. On the 7th day, they finally reached high ground, where Danny's emergency radio could transmit a weak signal through the electromagnetic interference. The rescue ships arrived within hours and found a group of aliens who looked at their human companions with something approaching awe and respect. Ambassador Veltar personally thanked Danny and Amy for their actions during the crisis, but both humans seemed surprised by the attention. They explained that helping teammates was simply what humans did and that any other member of their species would have acted the same way. This attitude confused the ambassador even more because most species considered such behavior to be exceptional, rather than normal. The incident on Xerion Prime became the subject of extensive study among Zephyrian scientists who could not understand how humans had succeeded where more advanced species had failed. Their reports focused on human adaptability and persistence, but missed the most important factor, which was humanity's refusal to abandon others regardless of the personal cost. The emergency meeting aboard the Zephyrian capital ship brought together representatives from all 12 member species of the collective for the first time in over 50 years. Rachel Stone and Colonel Ben Wright represented humanity as observers, since they were still considered probationary members of the galactic community. The news that had prompted this gathering was worse than anyone had expected. The Devourers had broken their century-long ceasefire and were advancing toward Zephyrian space with a massive fleet of biomechanical ships designed to consume all organic matter they encountered. Intelligence reports suggested they had already destroyed 3 independent worlds and were growing stronger with each victory. The hive mind species showed no interest in negotiation or mercy. Ambassador Veltar presented the situation to the assembled delegates with the calm efficiency that characterized Zephyrian leadership. Maps and tactical displays showed the Devourer, fleet's projected path through space and the worlds that lay in their way. The mathematics of the situation were clear, and the logical response was obvious to everyone except the humans. Rachel Stone listened with growing horror as the collective's military leaders outlined their defensive strategy. They would evacuate their most important worlds and consolidate their forces at heavily defended positions deeper in Zephyrian space. Worlds that could not be adequately protected would be abandoned to save resources for the larger war effort. Harmony was one of the worlds marked for abandonment, and the casual way the aliens discussed this decision shocked both Rachel and Colonel Wright. Harmony was home to over 12 million civilians from various species who had chosen to live there because of its peaceful agricultural society. Most of the residents were artists, teachers, farmers, and others who had no military value. When Rachel asked what would happen to Harmony's population, the alien delegates explained their reasoning with perfect logic. The collective's survival depended on preserving their military strength and industrial capacity for the coming war. Attempting to defend every world would spread their forces too thin and result in total defeat. Sacrificing Harmony and similar worlds was an unfortunate necessity. Colonel Wright had spent 30 years in Earth's military and understood the cold calculations of warfare, but he could not accept the idea of abandoning millions of innocent people without even attempting to save them. He asked if there were any plans to evacuate Harmony's population, but was told that such an operation would require ships and resources needed for more strategic priorities. The meeting continued for hours as delegates discussed supply lines, defensive positions, and acceptable loss ratios with the same tone they might use to plan a business conference. Rachel noticed that none of the alien species seemed emotionally affected by the prospect of losing entire worlds full of people. Their approach to warfare was purely mathematical. Ambassador Veltar sensed the humans' discomfort and explained that the collective had learned through thousands of years of experience that emotional decisions led to disasters in warfare. Logic and careful calculation were the only reliable guides for species survival. The needs of the many always outweighed the needs of the few. Rachel understood the logic, but could not accept it as the only option. She asked for permission to contact Captain Morrison aboard the USS Discovery to inform him of the situation. The alien delegates saw no harm in this, since human ships were too few and too primitive to affect their strategic planning in any meaningful way. The conversation with Captain Morrison was brief and direct. Rachel explained the situation on Harmony and the collective's decision to abandon the world to the Devourers. Morrison listened without interruption, and then asked a simple question that would define humanity's role in the galactic community. He wanted to know if Rachel thought the people of Harmony could be saved with human help. Colonel Wright answered that question by outlining a possible defense plan using human tactics and the few ships they could gather. It would be extremely dangerous and probably doomed to failure, but it was not completely impossible. Morrison made his decision without consulting Earth or waiting for approval from superior officers. The USS Discovery would go to Harmony. The alien delegates were puzzled by humanity's reaction to the strategic situation. Ambassador Veltar pointed out that defending Harmony would likely result in the destruction of human ships and the death of human crews for no strategic gain. The logical choice was to preserve human forces for battles that could actually be won. Rachel Stone stood up and delivered a speech that became legendary in galactic history, even though she had not planned it in advance. She explained that humans did not make friends in order to abandon them when times became difficult. Humanity's position was simple and non-negotiable. They would not leave Harmony's people to die without a fight. The delegates tried to reason with the humans using mathematical models that proved the defense of Harmony was futile. Colonel Wright listened politely and then explained that humans had a long history of winning battles that mathematics said they should lose. Sometimes courage and determination mattered more than superior numbers or technology. When it became clear that the humans could not be convinced to follow logical strategy, Ambassador Veltar officially noted their disagreement in the meeting. Records. The collective would proceed with their planned withdrawal while humanity pursued their reckless course of action. No Zephyrian ships would be risked on such a hopeless mission. Rachel and Colonel Wright returned to the USS Discovery, where Captain Morrison was already preparing for departure to Harmony. The crew received the news of their mission with typical human reactions that ranged from excitement to determination to nervous jokes about fighting impossible odds. Nobody suggested they should follow the aliens' example and abandon Harmony. Dr. Lisa Parker used the ship's communication system to broadcast a message on all frequencies that reached every ship in the collective fleet. She identified herself as speaking for humanity and explained their position in words that became famous throughout the galaxy. Humans did not abandon their friends, and any alien ship that wanted to help defend Harmony was welcome to join them. The response surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. 3 ships broke formation from the collective fleet and requested permission to accompany the USS Discovery to Harmony. Their captains explained that they had been influenced by human examples of loyalty and could not bear the thought of abandoning innocent people to the devourers. Ambassador Veltar watched this development with interest and made detailed notes about human influence on other species. The psychological effect of humanity's stubborn refusal to accept logical strategy was having unexpected consequences throughout the collective. Other species were beginning to question decisions that had seemed perfectly reasonable just hours before. The small fleet that departed for Harmony consisted of 1 human ship and 3 alien vessels, crewed by beings who had chosen emotion over logic for the first time in their lives. Captain Morrison addressed the combined crews and explained that they were probably going to die defending people they had never met. Everyone understood the odds, and everyone chose to continue anyway. The journey to Harmony took 2 days, during which the mixed crews worked together to prepare for a battle they could not win. Human tactics were shared with alien crews, while alien technology was adapted for human ships. The combination of different approaches created new possibilities that neither species had considered before. When they arrived at Harmony, the planet's population was already preparing for evacuation, but had nowhere to go and no ships to carry them. The appearance of the small defense fleet brought hope to millions of people who had been abandoned by their own government. Captain Morrison promised them that humanity would not let them face the devourers alone. The defense preparations began. Immediately as human military doctrine was applied to alien technology and Harmony's natural defenses. Colonel Wright worked with local security forces to organize civilian evacuations, while Dr. Parker helped establish medical facilities for the wounded. Everyone knew the devourers would arrive soon, and the real test of human character was about to begin. The Devourer fleet arrived at Harmony 3 days later like a plague of mechanical locusts that blotted out the stars. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Discovery and counted over 200 biomechanical ships that pulsed with organic light and moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. The small defense force of 4 ships seemed pathetically inadequate against such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Trelvon commanded the alien ships that had joined humanity's desperate mission and opened communication channels to coordinate their defense. The Zephyrian officer had spent decades studying military strategy, but had never faced an enemy like the Devourers, whose hive mind eliminated the possibility of traditional tactical deception. Every ship in their fleet shared the same thoughts and reacted instantly to any threat. Morrison studied the enemy formation and noticed something that gave him hope. The Devourers' perfect coordination was also a weakness because they could not think creatively or adapt to unexpected situations. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and individual initiative, which might confuse an enemy that expected logical, predictable responses to every action. The first phase of the battle began when Devourer scouts approached Harmony's orbital defenses, expecting to find evacuated installations and minimal resistance. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in their long history of conquest. The human defense plan did not follow any known tactical patterns and seemed to violate basic principles of military science. Colonel Wright had positioned their ships in a formation that made no sense to the hive mind because it left obvious weaknesses that any logical enemy would exploit. When the Devourers moved to attack these apparent weak points, they discovered that the humans had anticipated their response and prepared devastating ambushes using Harmony's orbital installations as hidden weapon platforms. Engineer Pete Rodriguez had spent the last 3 days working with Zephyrian scientist Kuval to modify Harmony's industrial facilities into makeshift weapons that could damage Devourer biomechanical hulls. Their combination of human improvisation and alien precision created devices that should not have worked but proved surprisingly effective against enemies who had never encountered such crude adaptations. The space battle quickly became chaotic, as Morrison implemented human tactics that confused the hive mind's ability to predict and counter enemy actions. Feints and sacrificial attacks drew Devourer ships into positions where they could be destroyed by coordinated strikes from unexpected directions. The humans fought like individuals working together rather than a single coordinated unit. Admiral Trelevon found himself adapting to human methods despite decades of formal military training that emphasized careful planning and logical execution. Morrison's approach to warfare combined instinct with calculation in ways that produced results even when they violated everything the Zephyrian officer thought he knew about space combat. The humans seemed to thrive on chaos and uncertainty. Meanwhile, on Harmony's surface, Dr. Lisa Parker was coordinating the civilian evacuation with local officials who had never faced such a crisis before. The planet's peaceful population included families with young children, elderly citizens, and individuals with special medical needs who could not be moved quickly or easily. Traditional evacuation procedures would take weeks that they did not have. Human adaptability proved crucial as Parker worked with teacher Mary Johnson and other volunteers to organize evacuation centers that could process thousands of people per hour. They abandoned formal procedures in favor of practical solutions that got results. Children were separated from adults to move more quickly, while medical teams focused on those who could be saved rather than trying to help everyone equally. The emotional stress of the evacuation was as challenging as the logistics because millions of people were leaving their homes forever with only the possessions they could carry. Mary Johnson's background as a teacher helped her organize activities that kept children calm while their parents dealt with the overwhelming task of abandoning everything they had built on Harmony. Parker noticed that humans handled the emotional chaos better than their alien colleagues, who became overwhelmed by the illogical behavior of frightened civilians. Humans seemed able to maintain compassion and efficiency simultaneously, while other species struggled to balance competing priorities. The evacuation proceeded faster than anyone had thought possible. The space battle reached its climax when a massive Devourer command ship broke through the defensive perimeter and headed directly toward Harmony's most populated continent. Morrison realized that conventional weapons could not stop such a large vessel before it reached the surface and began consuming everything in its path. Desperate situations required desperate solutions. Pete Rodriguez and Cuval had been working together throughout the battle to understand how Devourer biomechanical systems functioned. They discovered that the hive mind's coordination depended on quantum communication networks that connected every ship in the fleet. If they could disrupt these networks, the Devourers would lose their greatest advantage. The feedback pulse they created combined human intuition with alien scientific precision to produce a weapon that targeted the quantum frequencies used by the hive mind. Rodriguez had suggested the basic approach based on his understanding of human radio jamming techniques, while Cuval provided the mathematical calculations needed to affect quantum communication systems. When they activated their improvised weapon, the effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly began colliding with each other as individual units lost contact with the hive mind. Some vessels simply stopped functioning, while others fired randomly at anything within range, including their own allies. The victory should have been complete, but one damaged Devourer ship was falling toward Harmony's surface, where it would crash into a civilian shelter housing thousands of evacuees. The ship was too large to be destroyed by the remaining weapons and too close to be deflected by gravitational fields. Everyone watched helplessly as disaster approached the innocent people below. Pilot Jenny Adams made a decision that exemplified everything unique about human character. Without orders or permission, she flew her small fighter directly into the path of the falling Devourer ship. Her vessel was tiny compared to the massive biomechanical hull, but she positioned it perfectly to alter the larger ship's trajectory just enough to miss the civilian shelter. The collision destroyed both ships instantly, and Adams died knowing that her sacrifice had saved thousands of lives. Her last transmission reached every ship in the battle and became famous throughout the galaxy. She simply said to tell her children that this was what humans did when innocent people needed protection. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer fleet and the successful evacuation of Harmony's population to safe worlds throughout Zephyrian space. What had seemed like an impossible victory against overwhelming odds became the subject of intense study by military strategists from every species in the collective. Human tactics had achieved something that pure logic said was impossible. Admiral Trelvan filed a detailed report about the battle that praised human flexibility and determination while acknowledging that their methods violated every principle of conventional warfare. The combination of careful planning with spontaneous adaptation had created new possibilities for military strategy that other species had never considered. Captain Morrison found himself promoted to admiral overnight as news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy. The defense of Harmony proved that humans brought something unique to galactic civilization that went beyond advanced technology or superior numbers. They brought themselves with all their contradictions and unexpected capabilities. Dr. Parker's evacuation procedures became the standard for emergency situations throughout Zephyrian space because they balanced efficiency with compassion in ways that saved more lives than purely logical approaches. Her report emphasized that humans never forgot they were dealing with real people rather than abstract numbers in strategic calculations. The survivors from Harmony, both human and alien, formed bonds that lasted for generations as they rebuilt their lives on new worlds. Many chose to settle together in communities that mixed different species and cultures in ways that had never been attempted before. The shared experience of facing extinction together had created something unprecedented in galactic history. 1 year after the Battle of Harmony, The Galactic Council chambers on New Geneva hosted the most important meeting in human history as Ambassador Veltar prepared to present humanity's application for full membership in the galactic community. What had begun as a routine evaluation of a primitive species had become something unprecedented that would change how the entire galaxy understood civilization itself. The council chambers were filled with representatives from hundreds of species who had traveled across the galaxy to witness this historic moment. Admiral Morrison sat in the human delegation section alongside Dr. Parker, whose medical exchange program had already saved thousands of lives across multiple worlds. Engineer Rodriguez attended as the recipient of the Galactic Innovation Award for his hybrid technologies that were being adopted throughout known space. Ambassador Veltar approached the speaker's platform carrying a document that had become legendary among alien civilizations even before its official presentation. The report titled The Definitive Guide to Why Humans Are Simultaneously Formidable and Awesome had been circulated privately among government officials and military leaders who wanted to understand the species that had achieved the impossible at Harmony. The presentation began with Veltar explaining how their initial assessment of humanity had been completely wrong despite using evaluation methods that had successfully categorized hundreds of other species over thousands of years. Humans did not fit into any existing category because they combined characteristics that other species considered contradictory or impossible to maintain simultaneously. The first section of the report documented human persistence in situations where logic dictated surrender or retreat. Veltar described the crash on Xerion Prime, where humans had thrived under conditions that devastated more advanced species. Their ability to adapt and improvise using primitive methods had solved problems that sophisticated technology could not address. What impressed the ambassador most was that humans became more determined rather than less when facing seemingly impossible challenges. Other species typically calculated odds and adjusted their efforts accordingly, but humans seemed to ignore mathematical probability entirely when protecting others or pursuing goals they considered important. This trait was both admirable and completely irrational. The second section analyzed human military capabilities using the Battle of Harmony as the primary example. Veltar explained that humans were not the strongest or fastest or most intelligent species in the galaxy, but they were uniquely dangerous, because they never gave up and always found ways to turn disadvantages into advantages through creative thinking. Human warfare combined logic with intuition in patterns that confused enemies who expected predictable responses to tactical situations. The hive mind devourers had been defeated not by superior technology, but by human unpredictability and willingness to sacrifice individual ships to achieve strategic objectives. This approach violated established military doctrine, but produced remarkable results. The report noted that humans could maintain individual initiative while working as coordinated teams, which gave them tactical flexibility that species with either pure hive minds or complete individualism could not match. Human military units functioned like multiple independent intelligences that shared common goals rather than single entities following predetermined plans. The third section examined human compassion and its strategic implications for galactic civilization. Veltar described how humans consistently chose to help others, even when such actions provided no logical benefit and often increased their own risks. This behavior pattern had been observed in every human encounter from first contact through major military operations. Most remarkably, humans extended their protective instincts to other species without requiring formal alliances or mutual benefit agreements. The defense of Harmony had demonstrated that humans would risk their lives for people they had never met simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. Such behavior was unprecedented in galactic history. The ambassador explained that human compassion was not weakness, as many species initially assumed, but actually a source of strategic strength. Human willingness to accept casualties to protect. Others had inspired 3 alien crews to join the hopeless defense of Harmony and ultimately contributed to their victory against overwhelming odds. The 4th section analyzed human innovation and problem-solving capabilities. Rodriguez's work with alien scientists had produced technological breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved independently. Humans approached engineering, challenges with creativity that ignored conventional limitations and often discovered solutions that more advanced civilizations had overlooked. Human improvisation using primitive materials and methods had repeatedly succeeded where sophisticated technology failed. This ability seemed to stem from their willingness to experiment with unproven approaches rather than relying exclusively on established procedures. The combination of human intuition with alien scientific knowledge created possibilities that pure logic could not achieve. Dr. Parker's medical innovations had saved lives by combining human empathy with alien scientific precision in ways that produced better outcomes than either approach used independently. Her evacuation procedures balanced efficiency with compassion to process more refugees than purely logical systems could handle while maintaining lower stress levels among displaced populations. The final section addressed the philosophical implications of human membership in galactic civilization. Veltar argued that humanity offered something that the galaxy desperately needed, but had never known was missing. Most species had evolved to emphasize either logic or emotion, but humans had somehow maintained both in productive balance. Human influence on other species had already begun changing galactic culture in positive ways, as alien crews who worked with humans started questioning assumptions about the necessity of choosing between efficiency and compassion. The 3 ships that joined the defense of Harmony represented the beginning of a larger transformation in how galactic civilization approached moral decisions. The ambassador concluded that humans were formidable not because they were perfect, but because they refused to accept defeat when defending their principles. They were awesome, not because they had superior capabilities, but because they chose to use their abilities to protect others regardless of personal cost. These characteristics made them valuable allies and dangerous enemies. When Veltar finished the presentation, the council chambers fell silent as representatives from hundreds of species considered the implications of accepting humanity into full galactic membership. The humans in the gallery waited nervously for the decision that would determine their species' future among the stars. Admiral Morrison was called to address the council and provide humanity's statement for the official record. He stood quietly, for a moment looking around the chamber at the incredible diversity of intelligent life that filled the galaxy. When he spoke, his words were simple and direct, without the elaborate diplomatic language that other species favored. Morrison explained that humans had no grand plans for conquering the galaxy or imposing their values on other species. They simply wanted to be good neighbors and reliable friends to anyone who would accept them. Humanity would bring to the galactic community exactly what they had always brought to every challenge they faced. They would bring themselves. He described humans as stubborn, illogical, persistent, caring beings who would never stop trying to do better and help others succeed. These characteristics might seem contradictory or inefficient to species that preferred logical consistency, but they were fundamental aspects of human nature that could not be changed or abandoned. The vote that followed was conducted according to ancient galactic procedures that required unanimous consent for new species membership. Representative after representative stood to announce their decision and explain their reasoning. Some praised human military capabilities, while others emphasized their scientific innovations or diplomatic skills. The final vote was unanimous, in favor of human membership, with several species noting that they wanted humans as allies rather than remaining neutral or potentially becoming enemies. The formal ceremony concluded with Admiral Morrison accepting the galactic citizenship documents on behalf of all humanity, while promising that humans would honor their responsibilities to the broader community. The celebration that followed brought together beings from across the galaxy who had been touched by human actions during their brief time in space. Survivors from Harmony thanked their human protectors, while alien scientists shared research projects that combined human creativity with advanced galactic technology. The future held unlimited possibilities for cooperation and discovery. As the festivities continued late into the night, Ambassador Veltar found himself reflecting on how much the galaxy had changed since that first meeting at Kepler 442b. Humanity had forced every species to reconsider fundamental assumptions about civilization intelligence and the proper balance between logic and compassion. The definitive guide would need regular updates as humans continued surprising everyone, including themselves.